God and Other Delicacies has a weekly newsletter. If you'd like to subscribe, email me at godsdelicateshow@gmail.com and I'll put you on the list. Hello, everyone. Welcome to God and Other Delicacies. I'm Nicholas D'Augusto. Thank you all for being here. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming Halie Rosenberg to the show. Halie is a prototypical entertainment industry multi-hyphenate. She started acting at age 4 in plays, industrials, and short films, and transitioned that love of stage and storytelling into a career in media of all varieties. She's worked as a producer, writer, SEO strategist, and most recently completed 8 years as a talent executive at an agency where she auditioned, cast, and trained thousands of people a year for roles representing Fortune 500 companies. I met Halie as a part of this gaggle of USC friends I was fortunate to get to know, but when I found out what her religious background was, hot damn, I knew I had to get her in the studio. Welcome to the show, Halie!
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. It's always so funny when you hear people talk about you. Like, you're just like, oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
She sounds good.
Yeah, right? I've actually, somebody else has said that on the show. They're like, oh yeah, I feel better about what I've accomplished in my life.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for this validation.
You should feel good. You should feel good. I had a lot of fun things to say about you. I've had a lot of support from people getting the show started, but Halie was one of my first friends that was really particularly interested about this subject, and I really appreciated your enthusiasm for it. And so you've been a fun supporter of mine in this as I've gotten started, and it's fun to have you into the show and kind of get where you're coming from on this whole subject so that I can start to learn more about why you care so much about it. And certainly your background, which is that of you have a parent that was raised in Quaker, or she chose.
I was raised Quaker.
You were raised Quaker. She chose it at some point.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm excited to get into that because I've never, had never met anyone that was from the Quaker faith.
Most people haven't.
Yeah, well, I was looking it up. There's like a few 100,000 of you in the entire country. Okay, so let's dive in. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
It's funny because I realized I know from listening to the show that you were going to ask me, but I forgot, and then I was doing it, and I was like, Well, I had a very savory breakfast.
Okay. You ate a fucking Burger King burger or something.
No. But I had fried rice with cabbage and a fried egg.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Leftover Thai food.
It was old from, it was something I made yesterday, but reheated, and here's the thing, I love cabbage.
I'm not sure I've heard anyone say that. I like cabbage, fine. I've heard a lot of people say but it's this is great. Why do you like cabbage so much?
I don't
what
know.
do you
I think
love
it's
about
it's such
cabbage?
An underdog. It's really...
You only love it for its underdog state? That can't
I think
possibly be right.
No, I think
What are the qualities of a cabbage that make it specifically awesome? Talk to me about it. It's hard, right? It's one thing is that it's more robust of a leaf.
But it really, when you cook it down, if you've ever had mushu anything, right? That's mostly cabbage. And I can't believe I'm talking about cabbage on your podcast. But it's crunchy, but it's sweet. It's really
sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll pay more attention to that.
And it's really, I'm talking about the white cabbage.
Yeah.
Even onion cabbage. And so it has a good texture. I don't know, it takes on flavor really nicely.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it's also very filling.
Yeah. Yeah, and because it's not heavy in the water that a leaf lettuce is. Leaf lettuce is very watery and it wilts really quickly. I've become a big fan of kale, huge kale fan, but kale has a dominant flavor to it. So when you have a lot of, you can't just sneak that into something. No.
And the texture is not as nice. The texture is,
you like the texture
of kale.
What'd you say?
You got to work for kale.
That's true, but I like that. But this is a discrepancy.
We're actually uncovering something about your personality.
Sure, I love kale. I'm happy to talk about it. We have kale plants in the yard. All right, good. We got cabbage done. That's good. Okay, so you had leftover fried. I love leftover Asian style cuisines in the morning.
Savory.
Soups, hot soups and stuff pho and stuff like that. You can put a lot of spicy stuff in there.
That'd be a dream. If I had someone that could prepare me a Japanese breakfast every morning, because I don't want to actually cook fish myself in the morning. It's just a little too much. But if someone were to prepare that for me, woo. That would be the life, man.
All right. Well, we'll tell Chet about what he should be doing for your next birthday. All right. How and when were you introduced to the idea of God in your life?
I mean, I think very early on, I was going, my mom went to a Quaker meeting and we lived in Santa Monica. I'm one of the rare people that was actually born in Los Angeles.
Right. Oh God, great.
We were living in Santa Monica and there's a pretty decent size for Quakerism, Quaker meeting there. And so I would go, ever since I can remember.
And to be clear, sorry, just for not only myself, but for listeners, a meeting is sort of what a Catholic would call a mass, or,
a church, actually.
A meeting is an actual, a meeting refers to the structure.
Yeah, a meeting house is like your church.
So when you say it's a meeting, it actually refers to the structure, not just the actual meeting time.
Yeah, you meet in a meeting, but you go to meeting.
Oh, you go to meeting. Yeah, in the same way that we go to church, or that I was raised to go to church, you go to meeting.
Why don't I actually just give a little brief explanation? Because I feel like most people, when they hear Quaker, they think Shaker or Amish.
That's right.
And
that's what I thought originally.
Right. Most people do. They're like, oh my gosh, do you believe in electricity? And clearly.
Right.
Clearly.
Yeah.
So Quakers are a sect of Christianity that I guess really came into its own in the 1600s, the 17th century. They didn't like the idea of all the pomp and circumstance of the Catholic Church or Christianity. They believe that there is God within every living person and every living thing. And if you're quiet enough, you can hear God within you, as opposed to having someone or a man tell you what God is saying. And it's, there's a lot of other intricacies, but that is the founding thing of the belief of Quakerism. And so they gather in meetings together in silence. So they really value silence, but they also value community. And so you gather, you sit together in silence for an hour now. I guess back in the day it was a
full hour.
Full hour.
No one's leading anything.
No one leads. But if you feel that God is giving you a very significant message, you stand up, you share the message, you sit back down, and then someone else can speak. But it's never in succession. You definitely have to give that some air. It's not a conversation, essentially. And sometimes people speak saying what this person said spoke to me, and they'll say something, or it'll be a completely different thought.
Wow. Right. So it's just, right. Someone can take a moment, let that sit. Never becomes any sort of argument or debate or anything, but that impulse lets someone else respond in a way, either affirmation or a different turn on it, or it's just somebody else 5 minutes later says something else.
Meditated on something else. Yeah. And so it can be really interesting. I think the idea is that you don't speak directly after someone because you need to have some time to kind of meditate on it. And it's funny,
which is absolutely true if you want to actually feel like you're hearing it. So that's great. That seems nice.
And it's funny because you said there's never any arguments. So another big
the other thing is everyone boxes at the end of a meeting.
Well, Quakers are pacifists.
Right.
So they really don't box. And so it's interesting. As a Quaker, you can't be drafted to war. So a lot of there was an influx of Quakers apparently in the 60s during the Vietnam
I wonder
War.
why. Wow. No, that makes so much sense. Yeah. So you straight up, you could just say I'm a Quaker, and the government recognizes that if that's on their identifying report.
I believe so. I've never registered for that sort of thing, but I think when you check off your religion, I think that's part of it, or it used to be. We don't have a draft anymore, but I think that was a way for you to get out of going to the draft, that you were a conscientious objector because you were a Quaker.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, and I don't want to derail, so please don't lose your thought here, but this connects with something that Ken Haynes, who was on the show previously, was talking about. His father, Ken, is a generation older than us, and so his father is 2 generations older than us and fought in World War II, and his father was a Seventh-day Adventist. They are also conscientious objectors, but back then in World War II, that just meant you didn't have to carry a gun. You had to be in the medical field. So he still came home with PTSD and all that stuff from being someone that was thrust at 18 into being a medic, like taught to be a medic and sent off. So that it's also just interesting to me that I'm hearing stories about the evolution of being a conscientious objector. Like, you know, in the 60s and 70s, a conscientious objector meant you actually didn't have to set foot on the battlefield at all.
I think.
I think that's true. I'm just saying, from what I'm understanding, I think that's true. Anyway, I just find that fascinating that's another part of this evolution of what military and war and this type of religious interplay between that stuff is. Okay, so they're pacifists, and so they don't argue, and so how have Quakers, do you want to say anything more about the foundation of what kind of Quakerism is?
I mean, I think essentially you're sitting in a meeting. There are meetings throughout the United States. They're in Canada, England. I mean, it was started in England. I was just doing some research for this, but the most amount of Quaker meetings are actually in Africa now, which I thought was really interesting and not a fact I knew about Quakers.
Cool.
Sure.
Anywhere in particular, Africa?
No, I didn't get more
cool.
specific than that. I was like, right.
Got it.
And that now and I didn't even know this, that there's actually two kinds of Quaker meetings now. There's a programmed Quaker meeting, which would be more of like a religious service as you would know it, like as a Catholic or a Christian, where someone's actually speaking to you, which I just can't believe, because to me that's kind of takes away everything from what my relationship to Quakerism was really about being quiet and listening to yourself and to what others are saying and seeing it, seeing the God in other people. But interesting to learn. Those
are the people that came over. They were a bunch of Catholics who came over in the 60s, wanted to be conscientious objectors, and were like, this is too quiet.
Yeah.
I need some songs. So we're going to be the singing Quakers who don't have to go to war. That's what happened there.
Quakers love a potluck. There's a lot of potlucks. Yeah?
Are the potlucks quiet?
No.
You can talk at potlucks.
You can talk like after.
I know. I'm just joking.
At the rise of meeting, you can do whatever you want.
At the rise of meeting, that's the phrase. So does someone say at the end? Who's keeping time?
Yeah. So there's apparently back in the day it was the elders, whoever they were. But in my experience, there was a clerk of every meeting, and that was what would be considered like the preacher, but they're not preaching. And people took turns. My mom was the clerk of our meeting for a little while. And that person, the way that meetings end is that person turns to the person next to them and shakes their hand and wishes them good morning. And then everyone does that. And then meeting's over.
Wow. All right. So you go in.
You go in silently.
You go in silently, and the clerk is already there.
Yeah, and you
sit
down.
Meditating silently.
Yeah, you say.
So probably the clerk's job is to be the first one there that is there, kind of opening the doors, and if the clerk is there meditating silently, that the meeting is on.
Yeah, and it's not like they're a Zen master where you can't interrupt them. Like they're sitting there, and they'll say hello, but you're not having a conversation when you walk in.
Right. And then everyone just kind of slowly sits, and people maybe straggle in late or whatever, and then at the end the clerk gets up and
shakes the person next to them,
and then that's ripples.
Yeah.
Wow. And then are there Quaker reflection talks and discussions later?
That's interesting. It's been a while, honestly, since I've been. So I do remember at the rise of meeting, the clerk standing up and sometimes saying one or two things in conjunction with what had been spoken about throughout the meeting, because there's themes that sort of go.
They arise.
Yeah.
Somehow. It's in the air around us, and a couple people respond to it in an impulse reaction in the moment. They stand up and make their statement, and then afterwards there's maybe somebody is inspired to have a reflection.
Yes. Only really the clerk would speak at that point, but then it kind of opened, how I remember it, would open to community announcements and things like that. And when I was a child, I would go to Sunday school. There was a Sunday school for kids because it's a lot to ask a child to sit in silence for an hour.
Sure.
But you would be brought in the last 10 minutes. And so you would sit in silence for 10 minutes.
Cool.
And then you would join everyone in, after meeting, etc. But
for the potluck.
Yeah. The food. I was always there for the food.
Oh, for sure. Everyone's always there for the food.
That's not enough cabbage.
Not enough. Copy that. Oh, if it was break time, if it was ready for the break, I would have just gone out right there. I'm not ready to go out yet. But that's really cool. Okay, so give me a little history about how your family found it.
Well, it was really my mother. My dad was Jewish.
Your dad is passed now.
Yes, but he was bar mitzvahed and he was a Jew. I mean, my last name is Rosenberg.
Right.
So my dad never went to Quaker meeting with us that I can remember. Maybe for holidays.
He never participated. Okay.
No. It was just a thing my mom did and I did with her. My mom was very into raising a child of multiple faiths. So we did, much to like my father's kind of, not chagrin, but just kind of apathy. Like he really, I don't think cared that much about it, but she made sure we always did Hanukkah and, really like Passover and just was making sure that I was still identifying with that religion as well. I wasn't bat mitzvahed. I didn't go to temple with my father, but just we celebrated the holidays and kind of culturally appreciated my Judaism.
Did you have siblings?
No.
No. Did your parents meet in Los Angeles?
They did.
Where's your father from originally?
Long Island.
Okay. And your mother's from here, or no?
My mom was born in Chicago, but raised in Whittier for most of her life. Yeah.
Okay.
And we moved around a lot. We did end up back east for a while. So the meeting that I have the most amount of memories of was the Quaker meeting in Stamford, Connecticut that my mom went to. Well, we both went to.
What years were you there?
1990 through when I went 1998.
Wow. So you were living in Connecticut for those years?
Mm-hmm. Middle school and high school. Yeah.
Wow. So you were born and raised in Los Angeles. Yeah. And then for
my dad got
your father's job.
Yeah. My dad got a job. And
what did he do?
What?
What did he do?
Oh, he worked for HBO International. He helped
so he was in the business.
HBO, yeah. Whenever you go to a foreign country now, that was because of my dad.
Really?
Yeah.
So he was part of the kind of groundbreaking of what HBO became.
Yep.
Wow. All right. Well, I want to hear more about that. But so you're in Connecticut for those pretty formative 8 years.
Yeah. And then the second I could make a decision about what I want to do, I was like, bye, winter, going back to California.
Yeah.
Well, I just always knew I was going to do something in entertainment. At the time, I thought I was going to act. Of course, I'd been acting my whole life. I was like, obviously, now I'll just make a lot more money doing it.
Yeah.
Well, then didn't happen quite. I also, I'm super tall. I mean, this is a podcast. You can't see it, but I'm 6'2". And life is a lot harder when you're 6'2" as an actress than if you're just trying.
Than if you're 6'2" as a dude, because I'm 6'2".
Right.
So was your mother in the business as well?
My mom has always written. When my parents met, actually, they were both film editors, and my mom was editing some National Geographic stuff, and that was when my dad was still trying to pursue more creative endeavors. And so it's kind of interesting how their relationship kind of flip-flopped. And when he met her, she was like the accomplished editor, and she was bringing him on to certain small films and stuff that she and her friends were doing. She'd gone to film school. She went to UCLA. And then he got in. I think he just realized that wasn't going to pay the bills. And so he started doing cable consulting, whatever that means. It's just a word that's always been in my head. But he was consulting in the cable industry because that was still when cable was new. It was the mid 80s.
Right.
And we moved actually up to Pebble Beach for a while and lived up there. And he worked for this guy, Paul Kagan. And then HBO, he applied, he realized that he wanted more stability. And he got the job at HBO, and we moved across country for that job.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Good place to take a pause, and then we're going to get back in, and I want to talk more specifically about what your spiritual experience was as you were growing in this faith and jumping back and forth across the country. Okay, we'll be back with Halie in a second. Hello, everyone. We're back with Halie. Halie, one thing I wanted to mention about the Quaker history stuff in the first segment, and I forgot, was William Penn is this famous Quaker, and he's the namesake of Pennsylvania. He's the first governor of Pennsylvania, or he was the founder. He owned all the land.
Yeah, I think he owned land because he had been persecuted in England, and he was given land as I forget the word, but like a settlement, basically.
Wow. Oh, is that?
Yeah.
Is that what that was?
And
cool.
then he founded Pennsylvania, so there were a lot of Quakers that were in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that they were very important at that time, in the early formation.
Yeah, they were big abolitionists. They really supported the abolitionist movement, which makes sense. Why would you believe in slaves if you believe that there's God in everyone?
Right.
And then the suffragette movement as well was something that, even before that, just women's rights in general, because they were in meetings, women could stand up and speak, which was something very different than in other churches, that men and women were looked at as equals, which for the 17th century was, the 17th century was not something that was
incredibly progressive. In fact, in the very little bit of armchair research I did on this before, I saw that there were a couple of Quaker women that were put to death during those times for having stepped outside. I think from what I remember, it's women that were empowered in their own communities took that empowerment out into their larger city community or state community, and then were met with like a lot of resistance. And some of those women were put to death for that.
I just read a sort of good book called The Invention of Wings, and the lead characters in it are abolitionist sisters who became Quakers, and it's historical fiction, so they were real people. And it was interesting because I never really read about anyone that was Quaker. Being a Quaker is almost, at least for me, it was sort of like being in a vacuum because I have in my life have never known a Quaker that's my age. Like, I've never had a contemporary Quaker friend. And I have never been able to really talk about it with someone that is not significantly older. Like my mom's generation or older. In our meeting house, there were a lot of people that were older. And then there were a few other younger kids, like at the time, like 5, 6 years old, but they weren't, once again, I was like 11, 12, 13 at that time that I was going.
So in your meetings, you were the only one in your age bracket.
Yeah.
And there were not even that many below you. Wow, fascinating. Yeah. So it was it was something that a lot of these people that was attractive to being Quakers weren't having a lot of children? I mean, is that part of it too? I mean,
no, I think they were just older and
they'd already raised their children, and they just weren't that many new generations
coming.
Attracting your mother's generation was already a low level generation of inductions into the faith.
From what I've witnessed, yes.
Wow.
And then from there, I mean, there are some Quaker schools and things like that now, but I don't know any practicing Quakers that are my age. And I think, honestly, that's why I was so jazzed about this, because I like talking about spirituality. I like talking about God. I like talking about whatever it is, whatever you believe. I love when people have a faith and they want to talk about it, as long as it's inclusive. What turns me off is the people who can't see outside of their own faith. And this podcast is exactly the opposite of that. And so it was really cool. It was like, oh, this is the conversation I want to have, but like you don't have very often.
I really appreciated that assessment. I appreciated that response. I mean, that's obviously what I wanted to do. And so it's been meaningful to me to start to, having made this attempt, I've started to see people coming back to me like you saying, hey, you didn't know this, but I was wanting to have this conversation too. So that is really cool.
I like that you did some research.
Oh, thank you very much.
Other fun Quaker facts. We've actually had 2 presidents that were Quakers.
Which presidents were Quakers?
Can you guess? Do you know it either?
Well, so they have to be early is my guess. So I'm going to guess it's something like, so they're...
One is that will really surprise you.
So is that says... no, it wouldn't... Oh, no, it's like George Washington.
No.
No, I thought you were being sarcastic. So... I mean, what, is Thomas Jefferson a Quaker?
No, it was Hoover, which is, to me, I don't know.
Okay, so this is what I was going to say, is that this was probably a modern one that...
There's a more modern one.
The Quaker presidents are like 20th century presidents?
Yeah.
Hold on. So then who's the other one? Jimmy. Why can't I think of Jimmy's last? Or President Carter. No.
But very Quakerly.
I mean, he was very good. You know,
Yes.
he's always raising peanuts, right?
Yeah.
Okay, no. So not Jimmy Carter.
I feel like
No, like Nixon.
Yes.
Nixon was a Quaker?
Yes.
Oh, fuck yeah. That's great. Because he's Californian. And there's a lot of Quaker California. You were saying there's all these Quaker Californians.
Are there?
Well, that's what you said earlier.
I mean,
there's like a strong
there are
Quaker
some
meeting.
meetings. There's like
But then you
10
were like,
of them.
you were like, right, we're like, the way you said it, it had to be something extraordinary. I was like, it's,
Yes.
So I went early, George Washington, then I went
Yeah.
later. It's like, so someone that the Quakers wouldn't probably want to associate
it's
with it.
surprising to me. It's always been
Certainly
surprising.
certainly a combative personality, right? I mean, I don't want to step into a political atmosphere here where you start saying like, because he was a Republican, that doesn't line up with being a thoughtful, progressive.
Well, and I think it was different then. And honestly, I don't know enough. I really wish I knew more about any of this, but now that I've learned that he actually wasn't impeached, that he stepped down before he was impeached.
Right.
That to me is almost kind of Quakerly to just be like, okay, I hear that I've been caught doing something wrong. I acknowledge it and I'm stepping down, instead of like the chaos that we have today of someone who's definitely not a Quaker. And he ended it when he was caught doing something wrong. He took the onus of it and stepped down and actually wasn't impeached, which my whole life I had always thought he was impeached.
I did too, yeah. Do you have is that just your like analysis of the situation?
Yes.
Or do you feel like you have any sort of inkling from your mother or anybody else in the community how they spoke about Nixon at the time?
I've actually never talked about Nixon as a Quaker.
Because that's a pretty optimistic, positive spin on Nixon, right? The other thing is like, I'd rather not go to jail, so I'll just walk away. Or I'd rather not like suffer the infamy of this any longer.
But like everyone else has. Like, has there been another guy that's stepped down like that? I mean, but I'm just learning about all this, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
But listen, I don't know either, and I like this assessment. What I definitely like is hearing that Nixon was a Quaker. That's amazing to me.
It's really...
Okay, so now it's time to get into your personal journey. It seems like you're responding at a young age. The kind of little bit I'm getting from this is you had a lovely saying about how you feel about just speaking about God in general, which implies to me that you must have enjoyed the spiritual experience that you were given as a child, and that you have some strong connection to it, or at least had a strong connection to it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a powerful thing to tell a child that God is within them and that they don't have to look to someone else for God, and that they can speak to God whenever they want, and if they're just quiet enough, they might hear responses if they ask questions. So I think I thought about God a significant amount as a child. And I think a lot of kids do, like, especially when you're taught right from wrong and you're thought of someone looking down on you or, all of that. I didn't really have the looking down part, but it definitely felt a little bit more judgy than it does then. Like it was like, oh, I have to do these things because of God. But I also think that I just kind of related to the world in a little bit of a different way, because I'm lucky that I was taught that we were all kind of equal, and it made me appreciate, or maybe it was just my childhood, but I grew up really loving animals and loving nature and playing a lot by myself. I was an only child, and there was a lot of time of silence in my life, and I had a crazy imagination, which was why I loved acting. And it was hard though, because I was pretty nerdy, and I was my mom didn't want me to ever fight with people. So because she was such a strong pacifist, I feel like I never was really taught how to stand up for myself. And I was, as we talked about, I'm very tall, and I got bullied a lot.
Were you very tall, very young?
Yes.
My sister was the same way. My sister grew up very early. She was taller than me, and she's younger than me, and I know that was for her really problematic.
I've been ridiculously tall my entire life.
Yeah, right.
And
right. So Did you have impulses to push back at times, and then you heard your mother's voice in your head? Is kind of what you're saying.
It wasn't my mom's voice. It was truly, and I wish I could say, oh yes, no. It was because I could see the God in them. No, it was that I just didn't have the skills, and I didn't know. I had been kind of raised in this lovely little bubble, and my mom is a really, she does see the good in everyone, and it was hard because it was like I didn't know how to be cruel back. And confrontation's still really hard for me because it's just not something that was really, I wasn't raised. It's funny because I did learn to fight with my dad. My dad and I, especially in my later adolescence, like really would go at it. And I think it's helpful. I think you need to have some conflict in your life, and you need to learn how to and now I love a good argument, but an argument is different than bullying and all of that kind of stuff. But back to the God thing as a kid, like, I don't know about you, but like I would talk to God as a kid.
I did too.
I didn't. There was a time where I tried to pray every night, not really because I don't know where I got that idea. My mom certainly wasn't telling me to pray. I did have my grandparents on my mom's side were Protestant, I think. And so I would go to church with them. So maybe I got the idea there. But I remember like I didn't really know how to pray. So my prayer was just like, I always wanted, before I asked for anything for myself, because that was what my prayer was really just asking for stuff.
Sure. Early on, yeah.
But before that, I would pray for Mother Teresa to live to be 100.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Well, once again, like,
look, you cared about Mother Teresa, and you thought it was a good thing for her to be alive.
I thought she was
nice.
a really good lady.
She was doing good things.
She was.
Christopher Hitchens has a beef with Mother Teresa, which I'm not an authority to speak on him, but if anybody's interested in actually having someone rip on Mother Teresa, they can listen to Christopher Hitchens rip on Mother Teresa. It's pretty wild. No one was spared the wrath of Christopher Hitchens, but so you identified as a Quaker.
Yeah.
You identify as a child. You identified with this experience that you were experiencing as a Quaker more than your Jewish.
I would always tell people I was half Jewish, half Quaker.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yep. But the older I got, like the more I realized that like to be actually Jewish, like your mom is supposed to be Jewish. And
sure, you're technically not Jewish.
Right. I was not bat mitzvahed. So I stopped saying that, I would say middle school and above. But as a kid, I thought that was a really cool thing. We also were living, like I said, in Pebble Beach at the time. And Pebble Beach was a very insular community. I was one of 2 Jewish kids in the school, and I was only half Jewish.
Oh, wow.
There was 1 black kid in my elementary
Probably
school.
the only half Quaker in the school, too.
Yes. But no one even knew it. Like, I didn't even think to tell people that I was a Quaker. And I really relished kind of being different at that age. Like, I loved it. Another thing about Quakers is you don't pledge to inanimate objects. All of this was told to me, so I could be, whatever. But if you were a Quaker and you are put, like you're put on trial or you're going to go testify in a court, I wouldn't put my hand on the Bible and swear. You would just have my word, because my word is as good as putting my hand on a Bible.
I mean, are you talking about Pledge Allegiance too? Like to the flag?
So
you wouldn't do the Pledge of Allegiance?
No, I would sit during the Pledge of Allegiance.
Wow.
And it's really interesting because it's like, I thought I was so cool. And now it's like, it's kind of horrifying to think about. And it's not that I'm not patriotic, because I am. I love my country, but I do think it's weird how we all stop for sporting events and take our, and sing and pledge and do all this stuff. It does still feel a little weird to me, because I don't think everyone's actually thinking about what they're doing when they're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, I'm certainly, I don't know, I think nowadays I'm aware of what's going on when we sing God Bless America, certainly, or you sing the national anthem.
And there's times I'm like brought to tears by the national anthem.
But it's conflicting.
I want to be very clear. Like, it's not at all that I'm anti these things. It just is weird to me that we have children stand up every day and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Just like, that's interesting. I wonder how that.
Well, it's I can't come up with a more thoughtful, more slightly optimistic word than the word indoctrinated, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is what we are doing when we're brought up in a faith or brought up in your country, there's an indoctrination. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It has a kind of negative connotation from my point of view, the word indoctrination, because you think of that in a kind of psychological terms, that it's difficult to break out of, to recognize that you actually don't have to be affiliated with this thing that has been ingrained in you.
Well, and I feel like you don't have to indoctrinate to affect. I don't feel like I was indoctrinated at all. Like, I feel like it was really, I was kind of given loose parameters, and no one was ever really sitting with me being like, so Halie, let's really talk about what you're praying about or what you're thinking about. It was more of just like, here's some things to think about. Go off and think about them. And I lived with someone who was a very good example, at least for me, like of what a Quaker was and how to kind of, I was seeing other really interesting people. There were some people in our second meeting. There was one that was a Holocaust survivor,
Wow.
So it was, you're meeting people that are, Quakers are usually Quakers by choice. Very few people are born into Quakerism. And I feel like, so you're meeting people that are really making a conscientious choice, and they're having interesting conversations, and even only hearing 10 minutes of it, little snippets here and there. And then it was just interesting for me to witness, and I was able to make my own decisions without kind of being able to be told. And I think that we don't give kids enough credit. I feel like kids don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day to love their country.
Right.
Like, I think we could have more conscientious conversations with them and do more. It doesn't all have to be rote, because I think when it's rote, they're not actually thinking about what they're saying. But if we could figure out a way to engage them in what we care about, and I know as parents, you think about that, of course, all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. And as someone who was raised in the Catholic faith to very devout and loving and faithful parents, as a child, I experienced that faith in a really strong way. And then I had to go through a period of thinking about it on my own. And for me, my experience of it as a younger man was, it was challenging to start to understand that I was allowed to ask questions. I could allow myself to ask questions and think more broadly and question more broadly about these things. Because if you're not thinking openly about it at a young age or given a lot of space to question, there can be feelings of guilt, and there can be feelings of shame, and there can be feelings of fear and insecurity that I'm leaving something that was a safe space for me, and now I'm choosing to not be in that safe space. So that's one of the conversations I love having on this show, is that how do we create places that are faithful and true and honest and sincere, and also allow for places for this kind of questioning. And it seems like something you're saying is that you felt like that was relatively well achieved to some extent. Yeah. It seems like what you're saying is that you experienced that. You experienced a faithful, loving, God-oriented childhood upbringing that also allowed for openness and your own independent thought.
Yes, I would totally agree with that. And just, yeah, I never had a moment where I had to reject my belief or my belief in God. Like, I feel that I've definitely had periods of my life where I think I've kind of forgotten about God, or I wasn't as mindful. But I think, once again, like, you go through your 20s and even your 30s. I mean, in today's day and age, you have your phone. I mean, we're so distracted. It's very easy to not think about the bigger spiritual, it's very easy to not think about spirituality, period, or the bigger sense of like the life force that is, governing us all and all this. But I think that the older you get, you probably think about it more. It seems like I've noticed the conversations that people have. It comes with maturity and impending death and all of that.
Sure.
But,
or certainly death close to you.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. So I feel fortunate that I didn't have that, but I honestly, I miss it. I miss going to meeting, but I don't want to go to meeting.
Oh, interesting.
Because when I go to meetings now, they're different than how I remember them. And this is very un-Quakerly to say. I don't always like the people that are there.
Well,
and it feels weird. I was raised by a Quaker, but also a Jew. And so I have a really like low tolerance for bullshit.
ha, that's funny.
So I go and like you say one weird thing and I'm out. Like I'm just
Right,
like,
right.
I feel weird. Like
Right.
I don't like it.
It's the danger of giving everybody. Well, this is like
So
the
you
same.
get everyone on the floor.
Well, yeah, this is the thing about like at a wedding, you should never let everybody just get up and get to the microphone, right?
Yeah.
Because they're hammered and they just want to say something loving, but it goes on for 20 minutes. Like this is the thing that you're allowing in this space is the empowerment of each individual, but then also what's happening is you're allowing someone to tell you something about God in that moment when you're just trying to have your own God moment, kind of.
Or even just about themselves. A lot of people, I sometimes think, just speak to hear themselves speak.
Sure.
And
I think that's universal.
I can tell you, I think I've spoken in Quaker meeting like 3 times in my entire life.
Do you remember any things that you were thinking about at the time?
I remember one time I talked about my mom. It was in conjunction with Mother's Day, so I think I was just trying to be a really good child.
Ha ha ha.
But at the
That's
same
cute.
time, like I felt like, I was thinking about there was the impulse to honor my mother and publicly, and I knew it would mean a lot to her. But it was scary. And I was a kid that was performing everywhere, like I was literally on stage most weeks of my life, and speaking in Quaker meeting was really, really scary to me.
Sure.
And
Well, it's the difference of talking specifically about something that's, being an actor, certainly as I've gotten older, and I'll be honest, that was, I had my own fears about starting this podcast because I end up saying things at least a little bit every show where I'm like a little nervous as I say them out loud because somebody close to me somebody that I love might not agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is still dangerous to me as emotionally. But I've been an actor in front of people my whole life. It has nothing to do with that. It's about being an actor is not yourself. It's you're putting on something else. Aspects of yourself, certainly. Your body, certainly. You're putting yourself out there, but it's not your thoughts and you can always say, well, these are just the lines. This is just what we're talking about. Here's the character.
Right.
But now we're talking openly about ourselves and about a subject that can ruffle feathers and be divisive if people take it the wrong way.
well, and I think it's also I certainly don't think every thought I have is a thought of God, like it's definitely
no
hard
way.
to know when you're like,
It's one of the things I didn't like about being Catholic is I was like, I can't be punished all the time for thinking about Playboy. Like, give me a break. Like, I'm not going to think, if I think about Playboy, I'm not going to be like, God fucking hates me right now.
Right.
Like, I can't live like that.
Yeah. And
Anyway, so I'm not saying that you were thinking about Playboy, but what I'm saying is that you were.
Sometimes.
Okay, cool. Anyway, go on.
No, I feel like it's hard to know when that message is that strong. And so basically you're only supposed to speak when when you really think that the message is so strong that God is compelling you to speak. I don't know if God's ever compelled me to speak. I don't know.
Right.
I never.
What's your name for that feeling? Why did I speak?
Right, exactly. Like, what is that thing that is, too much it has to come out? I don't know if I've ever felt that. And I certainly, as a kid, that was really scary. But interesting to still have that as a practice that I'd had.
Sure. Cool as an opportunity that was open to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you took it a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you remember another one?
What?
Do you want to talk about another one that you remember?
No, I don't actually remember anything else. Maybe there's only that one time. It was always also the thing is you never know if someone else is going to stand up at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's a chance, and I have seen that happen where 2 people stand up kind of at the same time and then one will sit down. And so that's kind of a dance that happens in meetings too. And that I think, especially as a child, seemed very scary to me, especially a child that was used to blocking.
You're like, you guys are off rhythm.
Yeah.
We got to start this over again.
That entrance was not planned.
That was clearly awkward. Who's starting? Oh, no, I don't think she was the one that was supposed to go first.
It was better in rehearsal.
You know what? This is a good place to take a break. I am looking down, and this was a lovely and long second segment. So let me take our final break, and then we're going to get right back into it.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, we're back. Our final segment with Halie. Halie, I wanted to get into a little bit more, touching on kind of two different threads. One is that you mentioned that as an adult, you have grown away from practicing as a Quaker.
I haven't
and maybe
don't in a long time.
Yeah, you don't have a practice of any other faith on a regular basis. And another thing is obviously something that was referenced is that your dad died when you were you said you're in college, right?
No,
after college. No, I'm sorry. They got divorced when they were in college.
No, my
Sorry.
dad died like a year ago.
That's right. Oh, just a year ago.
Just a little bit over a year ago, yeah.
God, Halie, I'm sorry I missed that. That's shocking to me, actually, as I talk about this.
Shocking to me as well.
Yeah. Well, how did your father die?
He just died.
There was no
my dad was living in Costa Rica, and so I don't believe there was a autopsy done. If it was done, all the stuff was in Spanish. He just dropped dead.
No way.
He either had a heart attack or a brain aneurysm.
He had retired down there?
Yeah.
Oh my God. And so you had been kind of in regular contact with him?
Oh yeah, I talked to him the day before.
Wow.
Yeah, we were very, very close. And my stepmother called me from his phone, and it was really awful.
Oh my God, Halie, I'm so sorry. So you okay, when had he I'm just going to do a little backstory. So when had he remarried?
He had technically only recently remarried, but he had been with my stepmother for a very long time. I'm going to misquote this. I'm bad on years. I would say at least 15 years.
Yeah, okay. So then how long had he been living out of the country?
A few.
Yeah.
They had moved, so they had bought a place in France, and then also it's all very convoluted. But my dad's wife she's also now passed away.
Oh my God. So she died shortly before him.
6 weeks after, to the day. She had cancer. Yeah.
Holy shit.
It's been a rough year.
Wow, Halie. So this was something that your father was aware of, that you were aware of, that she'd had cancer for how long?
She had had it for several years. When she was diagnosed, though, it was stage 4. And
wow. So they diagnosed at stage 4.
Yeah, I'm sure part of what happened for my dad was the stress of watching the love of his life die.
Wow.
And she died so when my phone rang, I thought it was something with her, and then it was her screaming about my father. Yeah.
Unbelievable, Halie.
Yeah.
What happens in the coming days? Did you go down to Costa Rica?
I went to Costa Rica. My uncle went with me, which I'm forever grateful for.
His brother, your father's brother?
My dad's brother. And I have 2 stepsisters, so they both came down, it was no one thought my dad was going to die first. So
right. I mean, how could they at this point?
So it was just a lot of trying to figure out how to do things, and everything's my Spanish is not great. My stepsisters are Venezuelan, so they are both fluent. So they were able to help, and Alejandro was still alive at that point. But my dad's funeral was at a funeral home.
Alejandro is your
stepmother.
stepmother.
Yeah, and but yeah, my dad was definitely, like, his funeral was a very surreal experience. There was a handful of neighbors from where they lived that I'd never met, and that really only some of them spoke English, but most of them not really well. But we're so complimentary and kind, and there was a big cross above my dad's open casket, which is also not what I expected.
Wow.
Because that's a thing in Latin America.
Yeah. That
you look at the person. And but my uncle said some prayers, some Hebrew prayers, but also it's like who cares? Like it's not going to change anything, but it was just, I'm just sad that we didn't get to have some sort of more, I didn't get to have like a proper funeral with people that I knew or that were, you know, long-term people that knew him. But it's been interesting. I've had people reach out to me. My dad worked with a lot of people over the years, and like 2 women that he worked with for many years wrote to me, and one sent me pictures and, you know, wrote me memories. And now even on Facebook, because I posted on Facebook because I knew a lot of people didn't know about it. To this day, I still get people that are like, oh my God, I just saw that your dad passed away, and I loved him, and this is how I knew him, and blah, blah, blah. And that is amazing. And I'm very, you know, you never know really what to write back except thank you. And I love having people, I've appreciated that because it's kind of its own little memorial to him that kind of keeps giving at times when I'm not expecting it. You just open up your messenger and there's a new thing. But
it is, do you still
I just got one the other day.
Do you feel it as giving still? Do you feel like, is it a positive feeling, or is it's still like warming to feel the love in that way? And
just the people didn't forget him, you know, like he had quite a journey with his work, and that's a whole nother podcast. But so it's nice to hear how many people's lives he impacted and affected and mentored, and it's a gift to hear about, because I think for me anyway, when my dad died, like I like talking about him. I'm not afraid to talk about his death. I'm not afraid to talk about him. It brings me comfort because it honors him, but it also like it, you know, like it keeps him alive a little bit, you know, like, so I'm one of those people I'm like, no, we can talk about it. We can talk, you know, because I think, you know, we're all going to die but all we can ask for is to help people while we're here, to make a difference, to make changes, to affect people, you know, like we all are a part in this cog. So let's hope that when we're gone, people remember our cog role as helpful and good. And,
Did your father did he have any feelings about death? Did he ever talk, do you remember any conversations where you talked about his faith or non-faith?
I don't think he believed Jews don't really believe in heaven and hell. I mean, they definitely believe in an afterlife, you know, like it's like, oh, they're together now, whatever, but there's no hell. Jews have had it hard enough.
I have heard that though. Another guest told me that they don't believe in hell. Yeah.
It's interesting. My dad wasn't very Jewish in that he didn't go to temple, but he still did have a few holidays, like he would fast and stuff like that. But no, the answer is no. I guess we didn't really have a lot of conversations that stuck with me about that. But I think he just believed in when you're dead, you're dead. You know, it's just like you're just kind of gone.
Do you think you took that along, or what do you feel like now having such an intense relationship to someone who's dead?
I don't think you're totally gone. It's so interesting what happens in people's dreams and thoughts. And I don't know what that is, but my stepsisters and I have talked a lot about the dreams we've had, and they're very vivid and they're very real. And like when they tell me what they dreamed about their mother and my father, like I can picture it. Like it's like I know exactly what, at least I think I do, like of what they see, and it brings us all a lot of comfort. And my grandmother also is I think my grandmother's a little clairvoyant. It's really interesting.
Your father's mother.
Yeah. She has very vivid dreams. And so I think there's something to that. I don't, like if we do believe that there's God in all of us, and we believe that there's this life force, right? Like there's whatever God is. Like I don't think God is what we all kind of think God is, but it's like, so there's this something in us that still stays somehow, because a little bit of what my dad was is also in me. He made me, right? So that's still alive. And by talking, I don't know, like it's a different kind of existence, but yeah, I don't believe, like, you know, people say to me, oh, he's looking down. Well, I mean, I love that idea. God, I love it. But I don't believe it. I hope that they're together again, and I hope that all of that, but I don't know if I actually believe that. I think it's a really comforting thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of religion is comfort. I do think that people, when you die, you're not just, it's not just black for you. I don't know what that means. I think, but I don't know. Like, I think there's something to energy, whatever that is.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, you know, a lot of this podcast for me is I love hearing other people talk about it because I struggle so much with this stuff. I don't know. I'm still trying to identify what it is, articulate what it is that I feel. I've definitely had experiences as people do, you know, that are heightened throughout my life, that feel deeply impressionable to me, and that there feels like some kernel of truth. I wouldn't feel, you know, their dreams or their visions or their just moments of clarity. And I've had dear friends of mine who've died, and I've had dreams of them coming to me in my dream. And is that just my mind comforting me? Because my mind knows exactly what I want, you know? My mind knows exactly the story I want to tell myself, and so it tells it to myself while I'm sleeping. It could just be that, or it could be that it's something more. I don't know. I don't know if I need it to be anything more than that to still be comforting.
I think, and comfort is fine. Like, comfort is still, it's still something that's part of life, and it's still, that is still what, I don't know. It's fine.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't have to be an invention, because aren't we all inventions? Like, isn't everything an invention?
Right. Well, life is a dream. Yeah.
And now we take the blue pill.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's really lovely, Halie. I appreciate you sharing about that.
When my dad died, it was very sudden, right? So, and his father died very young, or like, I think it was 63. So my dad basically, and his dad had died of a heart attack, and it's something that affected my father's whole family, because my aunt was pretty young. I mean, everyone was pretty young when this happened, and or six anyway, I'm doing my math wrong. 60 in his early 60s, and my dad, his whole life, was very obsessed with health and fitness. He was extremely fit. He ate extremely healthy. And he only outlived his father by 5 years. And that was something that had haunted him his whole life. And that really, honestly, this last year hit me. And you talked about that I'm in a transitional period right now. But I was at a job that was a great job, and I'm very grateful for it. But after seeing these two very young, vibrant people die Alejandra isn't sudden, but it still is sudden and awful, because she was in her 50s and just had so much more to give. But it makes you appreciate every day and that life is actually very short. And so suddenly I was like, okay, I feel like I've done this journey of this job, and there's so much more I want to do, and I don't want to keep just staying here because it's safe. I want to pursue some things, because I want to have some tangible goals that I can say, at least I tried that, or at least I did this. It doesn't just have to be about, well, I was an executive at this company for 20 years. That, especially when it's not your company, it's not your exact passion. It's like, fuck, man, life's short. I'm going to try to make this TV show that I've been fantasizing about. And I'm going to try to finish that novel I was working on. And I'm going to, I'm trying to learn French. And, like, it's just, I don't know. I think, and I know that part of that's just probably a gut reaction, but I realized that I hadn't taken the time. I hadn't been quiet enough after my father's death. I did take a little bit of time, but it was a 1-2 hit, like my dad, Alejandro, dying. And then, I took a little bit of time, but then I went back to work, and my work was very stressful and fast paced, and I traveled a lot, and it was very easy to kind of get sucked back into it. And I realized that I needed to be quiet. And so I've had a couple months of being very quiet, and that's been very scary.
Sure.
And
sure.
It's been very strange. And like the things that you think about and the things that, you distract yourself with, and that's been part of the journey. And it's interesting having this experience of coming here and like rethinking about Quakerism and how I was raised. And like, it is interesting. Like, I forgot about the stillness and how much I crave stillness. And when I was thinking about that, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's part of it. Is just as a young child, like I kind of learned about that stillness. And I think we all right now, there's just kind of been an insurgence of people that are just so overwhelmed by the constant influx of data and information. And, we all talk about like, I just had a friend that was like, I think I have ADD. Like I just tested myself. I was like, honestly, girl, I think we all have ADD right now. Like society has ADD. And I feel like this year having, we're recording this right after the new year. A lot of people have been talking to me about their New Year's resolutions, and they're so simple. They're like, I want to cook. I want to read. I want to do that. And it's like, holy shit, that used to just be our hobbies, And I think it is that need to honor the quietness of life, and whatever that means to you. It doesn't have to mean that you're a Quaker or you believe in God or anything, but there's something to that time and that, whatever you want to call it, meditation, anything, of just not having that constant distraction that is, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It's just, it's important, and it's what I've been craving. And so I decided I was doing The Artist's Way.
Right on.
Another great book. If you haven't done it and you're looking for some answers, I really recommend it. But it forces you to write every day. And I hadn't done that in a long time, and almost every day I asked myself to quit my job.
Wow.
And so I decided to honor that. And, and she talks a lot about God in that book, and about that God wants you to be creative and wants you to succeed and doesn't want you to suffer. And it was nice to even just have someone writing, in a book talking about God to me. Like that was that, like when I say like it's just like, that was like, oh, here's I was just feeling so devoid of any spirituality. And so this time I'm hoping that, it's like I'm reconnecting with myself. I'm reconnecting with the idea of spirituality and whatever that is, and just trying to understand what my next step is. That was very long-winded.
Hey, man, I love it when I don't have to do any work. That's awesome.
Well, maybe you could edit it to sound a little more succinct, but
no, why would I want to? It was plenty. It was thoughtful. It was someone who's been doing it's the words of someone who's doing a lot of deep reflection. And maybe it seems embarrassing to like hear yourself talk a lot about something like that for a moment. But I feel like I would have questions sometimes as you were talking, and I feel like then you would kind of answer them. My questions were things like, do you feel like you're turning more towards what you felt at one time you would have defined as God before? And you're kind of saying, well, the feelings of what God was to me, I want those feelings. I don't feel particularly, again, I'm putting this is what I'm hearing from you, is that you don't feel the need to identify God or locate God in any particular place. You don't need to go back to a meeting. You don't need to go into any kind of...
I Googled it.
Yeah. You've Googled what?
I Googled meetings near me.
Oh, yeah? So you might, is what you're saying.
Might.
So this is where I'm glad I mentioned this, because I wasn't sure at first if this meant a process of you actually re-entering a formality of the religion, like a formality of this into your life again, or if you were just going to start imposing that on yourself, taking some of the lessons that you remembered or that you had learned from your childhood.
Yes and yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, look, it's open. It's
Yeah.
an open place for you right now. It's,
And like, meetings could be anywhere. Like I've been trying to walk outside more and, like hike. And I went to a sound bath the other weekend.
How was that?
It
How
was
was it?
awesome. And that's kind of like a meeting, but with sound weird vibrations instead of people, but it's speaking. But it's just, once again, it's just an hour and a half of not silence, but not a lot of distraction and just being in your head and thinking your thoughts and feeling the feels. So
let me ask you one final question. Having left, the job, and now 2 months into 2 or 3 months into this period of reflection and quiet, what do you think you want? What's coming to you? I mean, you said things like finish the novel and, do this TV thing, but what is it, is there a deeper thing that you're seeing coming to you, articulating something that, will just bring a certain kind of peaceful happiness, that something is sustaining, a sustainable happiness in my day-to-day life?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we all want?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm asking
money,
something.
but...
I'm not sure if I'm asking something that is simplistic, or if you have something that you can identify as specific that I might not be able to kind of guess at.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I think my goal right now is to just be really happy where I am and to appreciate this time, because this time is a gift that not everyone gets to have, and I'm very grateful and aware that. Very privileged, and sometimes you get in your own head too much and you worry about your own shit, and you're like, shut up, you're still very blessed. And like, you're getting to pursue this thing. I don't really need to talk about the projects I'm working on because they're not a thing yet, but
sure, yeah, I'm not going to force you to do that.
It's so cool that I've gotten, like I what I've gotten to do so far, and the people the conversations I've gotten to have, and the fact that I have time to come and have this conversation with you. I wouldn't have been able to.
I'm super stoked about it. I'm thrilled that you were in here. This was beautiful.
So I don't know what's gonna happen, and for the first time in my life, I'm trying to make that okay.
Okay, I have one last thing. You said you enjoyed talking about your father, and that it helps keep him alive for you. Is there anything that I didn't ask, or a part of something about him that you wanted to say, that's something that inspired you while we were talking, that you didn't maybe go down that road, or because we talked about something else?
My dad was very big about honor. And I think that's why I love hearing from people about what he did, and how much he helped them, because I think that was really a big part for him. And he had a journey that took honor away from him for a while. His work really, there was a whole thing about that, and it was so hard for him, but I watched him kind of persevere. And honestly, I watched him go on a similar journey to what I'm doing now, just not by choice. And I find myself doing a lot of the same things as he did, like cooking and reading and, reconnecting with people and your family. And it's brought me closer to him, and it's made me have even more compassion for him. I mean, I always did. I loved my father outrageously, but it's been an interesting journey to spend this time with him without him. And I don't know if I wish I could say something, like, oh, he taught me this amazing thing.
Oh, no, that's really beautiful right there. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, and that last statement is that really hits. That's a really beautiful, and obviously there's an aching in that.
It
right?
aches, man.
It
really aches.
Yeah, I feel it. I feel what you're saying.
I loved what one of your guests said about, I didn't know this, about the I'm going to use the wrong words, about in the Jewish faith of like, you mourn a parent for a year.
Yeah, Kaddish.
Yeah. I was like, yes, I feel like it wasn't until we hit the year mark that I felt like I wasn't going to sob at any moment. And, I'm an adult. I don't, it's like, I don't need my dad. I don't need him to survive, but I needed him. And I loved having him in my life, and I loved talking to him, and I looked up to him. And so it was really shitty to lose him.
It sounds shitty.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But thank you for sharing about it. It's really beautiful. And it connects, like you said. I appreciate you mentioning that was Hopper talking about that. But, and then it's interesting, like Charlie, he was an episode, as we were recording this, he's the episode that just came out, and he talks about his feelings of understanding that he won't be integral in his children's life after he dies, and the struggle he's having with that right now, understanding that when he's gone, like, that he's gone, and that they'll miss him, and they loved him, and he loved them, but, the distance that comes created, and I enjoy having people come in here like you that share so openly about this mystery that happens between these worlds. And it permeates all of us in that way.
And I think it's community too, and I feel like right now in day-to-day life, we forget about how important community is, and we think of it in different ways than we used to. But the idea of like people walking him, down the block all together, and just one of my girlfriends right after my dad died, she made me a little like gift bag of things. Like it was like, and it was so thoughtful, and it was just like, here's some things I saw at Target that I thought you would like, and just it was so comforting. And I will say, I used to be scared when people had someone die, like to contact them too much or do anything, because you don't like want to bring it up because you think you're going to make them sadder. But I'm here to tell you, it didn't make me sadder. And it certainly made me realize that talking about it can be much better than not talking about it, and having people do nice things for you, or do, just even checking in. It means so much, and we shouldn't be as afraid of it, I think, as we are right now, without, not being in a formal religion and not being in a place where people make casseroles for each other. Like, I would just say, if you see someone going through whatever it is, like, bring it up, talk about it, do something nice for them, because it will mean even more. It will mean something to you, but it will mean even more to them. And like, it sounds stupid and simple to say, but I just like, it really, like the things I've cried, like the people that have affected, it was like, God, those raisins from Target, they made me cry, but they were so comforting.
Oh, Halie, that's beautiful. Thanks.
Like, I don't know. I just like, call a friend.
I think that's beautiful, Halie. I think it's great. That's a good message. And it comes from someone who's living it. Man. I said at the beginning, I said, hot damn. So one of the things I've been doing in the show is I've been going, hot damn, I love this show. Hot damn, I love having these conversations. And I'm doing it again right now. Hot damn. This was a good one. All right, Halie, thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening.